Hi, it's Mike DelSignore. In today's video, I want to discuss what happens if you're charged with OUI and the case is going to be heard out of the Wrentham District Court. I practiced for years and I've done a lot of cases out of Wrentham Court. So I want to give you sort of the lowdown of what's going to happen at Wrentham Court in particular and how OUI cases are handled more specifically. So Wrentham District Court, there's two sessions. There's a jury session and a first session. When you come into court for your first court date, you're going to be in the arraignment session, the first session. Then after your arraignment, the case will be, you'll have pretrial dates, which will generally be in the first session, and then you'll have motion hearings and trials, which typically are upstairs, but motions can be done downstairs. So when you're charged with OUI, keep in mind these basic ideas, because a lot of people make the mistake of resolving these cases or not adequately looking into them. First, it's a crime of opinion, so anyone can say anything about anybody else. It's no different that a police officer says it. Just because a police officer says he thought you were impaired doesn't mean you were, because think about it from the officer's point of view. They're trained to look for just one thing, that someone's arrested drunk, that they need to arrest them and get that person off the road. They're not really trained, and they're not really looking for reasonable doubt, which a jury would. They're not looking for things that would benefit you. They're not trying to ask you questions like, they might ask you, do you have any medical conditions that affect your balance prior to the field test? But typically, if you say, I hurt my knee, they're going to say, well, did you see a doctor? They're going to try to minimize it and make you do the test anyway. They're not looking for things that are going to explain other causes of why you might be acting the way you are. They're just going to assume everything is related to alcohol. And this is just the nature of the job, nature of how police officers are. So how do we win these cases? We, one, minimize the driving. Sometimes the driving's overstated. They're going to say you crossed the marked lanes, you might have been speeding. We look at the driving and say, well, people speed. It doesn't mean someone's under the influence of alcohol. Marked lane violations happen a lot of times. Here's one method I use when I cross-examine the officer. A lot of times these officers are basically tailgating the person. They'll testify as one car length behind. Well, one car length behind for a normal person is tailgating. But so they sort of bait the person into a traffic infraction. They drive up on people's bumpers, and you don't know if they're going to pass you or not. So you sort of move into the side, and then they say it's a marked lane violation. The other thing is, a lot of times these cases will start by a 911 call. A lot of times somebody will call 911 complaining about you driving. Well, these witnesses don't always come to court to testify, number one. And number two, their information they give to the police must be trustworthy and reliable. So in other words, just because someone calls 911 on you doesn't mean the police have a right to pull you over. You can have a motion hearing to challenge that. And I had a case in Wrentham District Court that was basically dismissed because the motion to suppress was allowed. Police didn't have trustworthy, reliable information to make a stop based on that 911. And I had another one in Fall River District Court where it was the gentleman's third offense. So 911 calls can be challenged. They have to be, there's a two-pronged test. It's named after the case. They call it the Aguilar-Spinelli test. And the call is to be trustworthy, reliable. So challenge the stop. Don't assume the police had a right to stop you. Challenge the opinion, as I indicated earlier. It's just a crime of opinion. And number three, don't assume that the breath test is going to come into evidence. There's ways to challenge this evidence. It doesn't always come into evidence, and it's certainly not always accurate. So we do motions on challenging breath tests all the time. We try to get as many documents to learn about the machine, and there's different medical issues that can affect how the reading on the test. So don't assume the breath test is an accurate reading of what your blood alcohol is. It's not. In fact, it's an estimate. And there's a lot of assumptions the machine makes. The machine is assuming everyone is basically the same, and it has a breath to blood partition ratio, which is not, it's not anyone's particular ratio. It's just the machine needed to create an average. So it estimates blood alcohol. Temperature, body temperature can affect a breath test, and there's other ways to get it excluded. So keep these things in mind. If you have a case in Wrentham District Court, I'm well known there. I've handled cases there for years. It's a good jury pool, Norfolk County jury pool. Sometimes we can even do a bench trial. So don't assume you can't win your case. Don't rush into a plea. It's probably the number one mistake I see people make is they enter into a plea quickly without knowing the full consequences of it. On a first offense, you're unlikely to be punished for going to trial. It's probably going to be basically the same resolution. Even on a second offense, there's not going to be too much variation between a trial and a plea. Now, when you get up to a third offense, we may want to reduce the charge to a second offense to avoid jail time, but for first and second offenses, you certainly want to consider going to trial because judges don't penalize people for exercising their constitutional rights. So if you have a question on an OUI case out of Wrentham, feel free to call me. It's never too early, too late to call. My passion is to help people charged with OUI criminal cases, and I do it all over Massachusetts. You can reach me at 781-686-5924. You can call, text that number, call on the weekends, holidays, whenever you have a question, give me a call. I'll be happy to answer your question, talk to you, and help you get your life back on track. Michael DelSignore here. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to call me, comment in the comments of the video, or reach out to me online.